This is the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Small Business Update with Tom Sullivan, exclusively on ASBN.com.
Hey everyone, Jim Fitzpatrick. Thanks so much for tuning in to another edition of the U.S. Small Business Update from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce with Mr. Tom Sullivan. Tom, thank you so much for joining us once again on the show.
Thank you for having me, Jim. It's good to be here.
The Fed announced that they are going to keep rates the same. They're not going to increase them. So what say you on that?
Well, first of all, amen. Thank goodness the rates did go up again, because we are seeing increasing anxiety from small businesses about higher interest rates. So Jay Powell, thank you. I think not only is that a positive news for small business that we are starting to tame inflation, but just really, I think, somewhat of a sigh of relief for a lot of small business owners on Main Street that may already be struggling a little bit with accessing capital. And every time interest rates go up, the tightness of capital gets a little tighter. And so this is really good news for small business.
Yeah, it really is. There's no question about it. And it appears as though inflation is at about 4% today versus 8% a year ago. So that's good news too?
It is good news. However, it's going to be a while before we see that good news manifest itself on Main Street. And the reason I say that is, as you know, we survey small businesses every quarter with our partner MetLife, and we continue to see that inflation is the highest concern for small businesses. It's been at about 54% of small businesses list inflation as the top concern, and that actually hasn't gone down. So we are optimistic, like the small businesses that we represent. And so we're optimistic that now that Jay Powell hasn't raised interest rates and we see the national inflation numbers going down the way that you talked about, we would like to think that the concern over inflation will eventually go down too. We're just not there yet.
Yeah, for sure. And, this really comes at the heels also of some huge numbers in terms of small businesses that are starting, right? I mean, we're looking at new business starts way up.
Yeah, Jim, that's really the tremendous news about how resilient small businesses are.
Yeah.
We know certainly that even after COVID, we've got a worker shortage. Small businesses need employees.
Yeah.
We see supply chains continuing to be difficult, higher inflation. But even in the face of all those headwinds, we have the gold, silver, and bronze 3 years of the highest new business growth we've ever experienced.
Wow.
So there really is a lot of good news, and Jay Powell's action to keep the interest rates steady, that's good news too. So it's only a matter of time where we start seeing small businesses capitalize on that optimism, capitalize on that good news. Hopefully they'll be able to hire coming up, because that has been a huge headwind. This idea that small businesses aren't at capacity because they can't find qualified and willing employees. That's actually been front and center on Main Street for over 4 years. This is even before the pandemic.
Right.
We saw businesses struggling to stay open 7 days a week if they didn't have the employees. I mean,
That's right.
You and I have probably experienced some restaurants and other shops where they say, we'd love to be open, we just don't have the staff. Now, as a dad of 2 teenage boys, that presents some opportunities for their summer employment. So things look good in my household as well.
That's right. And it's amazing. I too have got a daughter home from college and said, get out there and get a job, because every business I walk into says we are hiring. I started taking pictures of on my phone and sending them to her. Say, look, here's another one. And interestingly enough, it's such a a market out there right now where these kids are going from job to or company to company saying, well, I can get $17 an hour, right down the block. What's your offer? It's crazy. Some of them are actually paying. Some of these small businesses are actually paying a signing bonus of $500 or $1,000 just to get that person in, whether it be for the summer or a permanent position, because they know that without those workers, it's going to have a tremendous impact in their business.
Yeah, I mean, the job market right now is extremely competitive.
Yeah.
Now, Now I'm a little bit biased. I think that working at small business is the best place to work, primarily because of the flexibility, because you're actually face to face on a daily basis with the founder and the owner.
That's right.
You learn so much directly from the founder. Just the experience of working at a small business is really pretty special.
Sure.
So I am a little bit biased, but you're right. It's a real competitive job market. And actually, that's helping us here in Washington, D.C. We're talking with Congress about what it takes to keep inflation going down. Because access to workers, significant progress on getting more legal immigrants into the workforce, that actually is another step that will bring inflation down. We've seen some recent progress actually in the debt ceiling negotiations and the law that was signed. There is permitting reform. That's something that we believe will also bring inflation down. The certainty that businesses, and especially small businesses, need to succeed, we're starting to see progress. And the idea that people are competing for your daughter and my sons to get their job, that replaces a little bit of some policies that are insisting that government has to determine what wages are.
Right.
Instead, we're seeing in this competitive environment, the small businesses are competing with each other, whether it's a signing bonus or a hire per hour. And that actually bodes well for small businesses too.
Yeah, there's no question. I just saw too where New York City came out with a new minimum wage for delivery personnel. If you're one of these people on a bike delivering goods or food through many of the different delivery services or what have you, I think it's like $17 or $18 an hour minimum wage. Put out there. Now I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing to have the minimum wage that high, but nevertheless, I agree with you. It's great to see that the free market is able to govern that, and we don't have to turn to the feds to say, okay, what should all of these businesses be charging? Is really because and it's also dependent upon from a geographic location. It's going to be different in the outskirts, some areas of Montana, than it's going to be in New York City or maybe in Atlanta versus in San Francisco, right? So let those markets kind of govern that, right?
Yeah, I mean, Jim, I think you're raising a really good point about the geographic differences. And there are some states that tend to take a little bit more of a micromanagement approach than others. I mean, California really does look at regulation as a cure for many of the challenges that the states face. And we see a migration of small businesses away from California into Nevada, New Mexico, and Texas. Yeah. And so, it's the double-sided coin. On the one hand, we believe that that's not the right environment for small businesses to flourish. But on the other hand, folks in Nevada and New Mexico, Arizona, and Texas are very happy that they're able to attract small businesses who don't want to necessarily experience high regulatory costs of California.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I agree with you. So in addition to the rates, in addition to some of the things that we just talked about with regard to small businesses hiring people and needing people, what are some of the other initiatives that you're working on there at the Chamber?
Well, we actually have a fantastic program that we've chatted about before. It's called the Prompt Pay Pledge. This is a recognition that small businesses need to be paid faster by their larger business clients. And we've seen a good uptick from our largest businesses saying we are committing to pay our vendors and suppliers faster. So we're seeing some uptick in that involvement because I think this all comes down to the realization that we can't take small businesses for granted.
Right.
We know certainly, especially with COVID, when we woke up facing the possibility that many small businesses would just disappear overnight because they were shuttered. I think that shock wave has actually translated into a greater appreciation of small businesses. Yeah. And for larger businesses to rely on small business for supply chains just makes sense. Yeah. And so for them to encourage small businesses to do business with them, paying them faster is a great next step. So we're seeing an uptick in that. Mm-hmm. We also have a national award. I mean, our America's Top Small Business Awards. It's going to recognize the best small business in America. Applications for this award close July 7th. So we're excited about that. And then last but certainly not least, because I am in Washington, D.C., we're doing a lot of work with Congress to make sure that their approach when it comes to the federal government's interaction with small business makes sense. So we actually are a huge supporter of Senator Joni Ernst, who's the highest Republican on the Senate Small Business and Entrepreneurship Committee. She has introduced legislation called the Prove It Act. And basically what this law does is it requires agencies to take into account the views, interests of small business before they finalize rules and regulations. So for instance, recently the Supreme Court made a final ruling on wetlands rules. After 10 years, they finally figured out that the EPA could not prevent the Sacketts in Idaho from building on their property because across the street, across the highway, behind a set of houses, there's a lake. What Senator Ernst's Prove It Act does is it reverses this whole process. It says, hey, look, EPA may be well-intended, but sit down and talk about solutions with small businesses first.
Right.
Before you go and do something that takes 10 years and the Supreme Court of the United States to say, hey guys, you did it wrong and you overreached. So on the one hand, we're really excited that the Supreme Court actually stopped this federal overreach. But on the other hand, there's a lot more that we can do to get small businesses into the process so that their solutions actually become the federal government solutions.
Yeah, that's fantastic because we see that all over the country where small businesses want to grow and but they could be halted by some federal agency that has not done the complete math on the impact that it's going to have on small businesses in that market or in that area. And so that's fantastic. Kudos to you guys and Senator Ernst for putting something like that together because we need more of that. That's the kind of that's the kind of support that small business owners and entrepreneurs need in this country. They need a voice like you, Tom, there at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, fighting for them every day because everyone's off doing their thing. They're running their businesses. They're creating their companies, and they don't have time to do what you guys do, fighting the good fight every day there in D.C. So keep it up. Love to talk about more of that and maybe in our next show because that's something that we really want to stay on top of. So Tom Sullivan, Vice President for Small Business Policy at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Thank you once again for joining us on the update. So we very, very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Small Business Update with Tom Sullivan.